It's 1945. World War II is drawing to a close. Superman and Batman, will they continue to dominate the list? And a book makes the top 10 based on recent movie speculation? Let's look at the key issues and their CGC counts for the year 1945 in comic books, up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe. Check out the description of this video to links for my Instagram, whatnot, eBay store, and email. We're going to get right into it. I've been doing this series for a few months now, year by year. The top books on the CGS Census count, universal blue labels only, and we will address restored, which is less of an issue than it was earlier in the Golden Age and certainly in the Platinum Age. And what books made the top 10? Now, in the 1940s, the titles Superman and Batman have been dominating the list, sweeping the top 10 in both 1944 and 43 and taking 9 of the top 10 spots in 40, 41, and 42. Will it be any different in 1945? Well, we're going to dig into the list, and we're going to also look at the most frequently submitted books, the highest with the CGC census count for different publishers throughout the Golden Age. Also look at some keys and first appearances and classic covers and all that sort of stuff, and see if we can draw any conclusions. I'm having a lot of fun. I know that there are people that really enjoy this series, but there aren't a lot of people that are enjoying the series. So if you could, hit the like button and maybe get this pushed a little bit, feel free to share it. I do think this content is somewhat timeless. I don't think the CGC census counts are going to change that much, especially for books in the 1940s. And we're going to continue this series all the way through 2025, because if I go week by week, it'll be 2026 before I get to 2025. We still have, 79 years to go to catch up. But we're going to take into this top 10 list, and I have a lot of books. It's probably the most books that I put in any of the lists so far. We're going to start at number 10. We're going to count down the top 10, and we'll look at other important books from 1945. And this is a book that broke into the top 10 list based on movie speculation. Interestingly, with 150 copies to make the top 10, that's fewer copies than were needed to take the top 10 in 1942, 43, and 44. So there are fewer books being submitted for certain titles. I mean, maybe it's more spread out, but you got to think the books that are from 1942, let's say, are going to be worth more on the whole than the books from 1945. But we're going to take a look at number 10, and number 10 on the list is Marvel Family, number 1 from Fawcett Publications, and this is the first appearance in the only Golden Age appearance of Black Adam. And of course, this book will change the course of the... There are 150 copies, blue label in the census. What's interesting is this has the lowest average grade of the top 10 books at 4.07. Generally speaking, if it's under 4, I kind of highlight it at this point in time because it's significant. It means a lot of low-grade copies were submitted, and I think leading up to the Black Adam movie, a lot of people were submitting these books as the price was climbing. I don't really talk about values because that's not what this is about. We talk about the value in general compared to other books, just in amorphous terms. We don't talk about any specific sales figures. I'm just more interested in the books that made the list and why. We could talk. This book was hugely valuable leading up to the thing, and it is more affordable now. Still a great key. I believe this is, now we're in 1945. This book, I believe, is only 36 pages. The same count as like a modern book. Not a big, thick 68 pages like books from the earlier 60s. And not like 52 pages or 56. The page count kind of scaled down over time. But it has this iconic cover even without Black Adam. And it talks about how the Marvel family joined forces to face Black Adam. So once again, 150 copies to make the top 10. Coming in at number 9 is Superman number 34, with this cover by Jack Burnley. And this is, you'll see this in a number of these covers, especially in the top 10, that are kind of driven by characters that are already established. Here, the American Red Cross needs your support. Give generously. Still, the war effort still ongoing. Victory in sight. The war would be over by the end of 1945, but some patriotism and some support for our troops and the Allies evidenced in some of these covers. This is an example. 163 copies on the Census. At number 8 is Superman number 36, a little bit different here. A little bit later in the year as well. This is from September, October. And this is Superman 36, where, I don't know, Superman was doing something with the icebox. That's what they called it back then. Not a refrigerator, but an icebox. And, it's just kind of a curious, campy cover. Number 7 on the list is another campy cover, Batman number 29, Dick Sprang cover, where they're on these old-timey bicycles. And that's just a very strange cover, to be honest with you. There are 196 copies on the Census. Coming in at number 6, Batman number 31, an Infinity cover, the first appearance of Punch and Judy. And this cover is also by Dick Sprang. Not a lot to say about a lot of these books. There's a lot of similarity in them, and the fact of the matter is people collect Batman, people collect Superman. The runs, and I've talked about before, they're easier to complete than Action or Detective. They don't go back as early. They don't, Detective has some impossible to find issues. They're a little bit cheaper for the early issues. Batman 1 is less expensive than Detective 27, and Superman 1 is less expensive than Action 1. And they came out, at this point, bi-monthly. They started quarterly, so there are fewer issues to collect, whereas Detective and Action were pretty much monthly from the get-go. So let's take a look at number 5 on the list. We go back 1 month to Batman number 30, a World War II themed cover by Dick Sprang. Batman saying, "Here's a new gun from the folks back home, soldier." Yep, the folks, they're backing the 7th War Loan. So kind of war bonds and loans and stamps and all that sort of stuff as we are nearing, again, the end of the war. This is August, September cover date, so we're getting close to the end of World War II. At number 4 is the top Superman book on the list, and it's Superman number 32, this classic Wayne Boring cover, who was a predominant Superman artist from the mid-40s, pretty much into the early 60s, before kind of Kurt Swan took over. And he did work right into the 1980s. Roy Thomas would use him on All-Star Squadron. But this classic cover with Superman being struck by lightning, saying that it tickles, I do have a copy of this. It's been buried in a Superman collection for a while, but that is a really cool cover. And I think that iconic cover is what puts this as the top Superman book on the Census. What does that mean for the top 3? Let's see. At number 3 is Batman number 28, with a cover by Jack Burnley and Charles Paris. There is a Joker appearance in here. He's not on the cover. There is a need for the Red Cross needs your support. A slight World War II themed cover. Number 2 on the list is Batman number 26. This a campy one where Alfred joins Batman and Robin on the Bat Sled. And this is a cover by Jerry Robinson. And there are 242 copies on the Census. And the number 1 book, most submitted book for 1945 with 245 copies on the Census is a copy of Batman number 27. This Santa Claus cover. We're less than a week away from Christmas. Season's greetings. At the top, back the 6th War Loan. This is an early 1945 book. It's cover dated February, March, so it would have come out, I guess, a couple of months earlier, 2 or 3 months earlier in December, in time for Christmas. Santa covers are very collectible, especially in the Golden Age. And, a lot better Santa cover to collect than Justice League of America 110. But there are 245 copies of this on the census. That's notable because that's fewer copies than were needed to finish in the top spot in either 1943 or 44. So fewer books being submitted from here in the mid 40s than were submitted in the earlier 40s. I have to think there are probably just as many copies, if not more, that are in existence. Probably not significantly more, but fewer being submitted. The value isn't as high for Batman number 27. It is, let's say, for Batman number 20 or 15. So, in the lower grades, it probably doesn't make sense on the whole to submit it. In addition, this is the book that has the most restored copies on the census at 24, which is less than 10% of the number of blue labels on the census. So compared to the early keys, the Action 1, Superman 1, Batman 1, Detective 27, Captain America Comics 1, etc., etc., you're going to see a far lower percentage of restored books. Now, we do have a whole lot of other books to cover, and my time is somewhat limited. I do have to actually go to my job in the morning, but this might not come out till Friday. I try to get these videos out on Thursday, but sometimes life interferes, and it requires a lot of research and a lot of editing to put the the pictures in and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, this is number 14 on the list is the top book from DC that's neither Superman nor Batman, and that is Detective Comics 102 with a Dick Sprang cover where the Joker has a house on his back. Joker covers. Joker covers are always going to be more submitted on the whole than other covers. That's a prime niche for collectors. It's to collect Golden Age Joker covers. 113 copies on the census. What book, neither DC or Fawcett, has the most copies on the census for 1945? Is it a timely book? No, it is not. It is a Dell book. 4-color number 62. Donald Duck in frozen gold. Cover by, actually, Carl von Buettner, but the story and art inside is by Carl Barks, a classic story with Donald and his nephews. There are rabid Carl Barks collectors, and a lot of Carl Barks collectors are Carl Barks collectors, not really comic collectors in general. There are 106 copies on the census. Next, another Fawcett book and another number 1 from Fawcett. This is Mary Marvel Comics number 1. Came around the same time as Marvel Family. She gets her own book, and the cover here is by Jack Binder. There are 99 copies on the census. Now we finally get to Timely. And the book that has the most copies on the census from Timely is Captain America Comics number 47, coming in at the 20th position. This is a classic Alex Schomburg wartime cover, Nazi swastikas, disproportion on the cover between the characters and the antagonists and the background and the other things in there. Just a very busy cover. Schomburg, very highly sought after. 92 copies on the census. And I make note of one other book that trails it just by one spot with 86 copies on the census, and that's Captain America Comics number 46. And this has that the Holocaust cover. Really the only time the Holocaust was referenced. And this is early in 1945, before Germany was liberated. And we can see also an Alex Schomburg cover. By this point in time, Simon and Kirby had moved on. They were in the service, I believe. I know Kirby was. Carmine Infantino worked on this book, as did Paul Reinman. But this is a very sought-after cover because of its historical significance. Let's go to number 23 on the list, and probably the most significant first appearance of a character from 1945. Do you know what I'm talking about? It is More Fun Comics 101, the first appearance of Superboy. Now, Superboy, from this point in time up till Crisis, they were stories of Superman when he was a boy back in Smallville. And this cover with Green Arrow on it is by, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's Mort Meskin or not. But it's the orange and first appearance of Superboy. It's also the last appearance of Spectre for 21 years. Basically, Superboy supplanted Spectre in More Fun Comics. And a few issues later, he would move over to Adventure. But there are 84 copies of this on the Census. Up next, at 24th position, the top-ranking comic from Fiction House, and that is Rangers Comics number 26 with this classic cover. The woman parachuting, I guess you could call it a headlight cover. Very well-rendered airplanes behind her. I mean, she's well-rendered as well. There are 82 copies on the Census. And again, this is the Fiction House is a pretty popular with collectors. It started like in the early to mid 40s. You can see here issue number 26 in 1945, and the Jungle and the Jumbo, the Rangers, Wings were all Fiction House titles. And here it took 82 copies to make the Census. That's about the same number as are on the Census for the top timely at Captain America Comics at 92, which is a little less than half of the top DC books from the era. Okay, let's go to another book that has a lot of copies on the Census, and it kind of surprised me how many. And this is Mask Comics number 1 from Rural Home. This is a classic cover by L.B. Cole, and his name will come up more than once in this list, as Alex Schomburg. And there are a couple more classic artists of this era whose cover work is exceedingly sought after. And I think especially now that, slabs are a major part of collecting, especially harder to find Golden Age books. I mean, you have to be wary of buying really expensive Golden Age books raw online, even in person. But here it kind of indicates that it has been certified. This is from the Promise collection, this particular copy that I pulled up. And just a classic cover, Mass Comics number 1. There's 68 copies on the Census. The other thing is significant is that the mean grade on the Census is 3.62. That's a lot lower than some of the other books. For instance, most of the Superman, Batman books that made the top 10 are in like the 5 to 5 range for a mean grade. The best of those is 5.54 for the Batman 27. The Captain America comics has around the same, 5.47, 5.40, or 4.40 for the Holocaust cover. So this is a much more in-demand book at any grade. It's a more expensive book, and that tends to be what happens. If it's a more expensive book, it's going to be worth getting graded even down to a 0.5. And also, we're not really in the pre-code horror just yet. We haven't had the first horror book, but we kind of have these precursor to pre-code horror with these fantastical, often horrific covers. Up next, at 48th position, this is from Continental, is Suspense Comics number 8. Also an L.B. Cole cover. You can see his signature down there in the bottom left-hand corner. This spider with the skull and the man and woman being captured in it. Definitely a horrific cover. 67 copies on the Census. Next, at number 56, another DC comic. This is All-Star Comics number 24. I put this down. This is the first cover appearance of Mr. Terrific and Wildcat. Or maybe... I'm not sure if it's Mr. Terrific's first cover. It does say it's Wildcat's first cover, and he is a fairly important character. It was one of those things, and this is around the time there was the schism between National, DC Comics, and All-American, what we have here, and some of the characters that were in the JSA at the time were taken out, stories kind of redrawn at the last minute to insert All-American characters. For instance, if we look at the roster here, Green Lantern, Dr. Midnight, and Atom all appeared in All-American Comics. Johnny Thunder, Hawkman, and Flash all appeared in Flash Comics. And Wonder Woman, Mr. Terrific, and Wildcat all appeared in Sensation Comics. Previously, you had Starman and Sandman from Adventure Comics, Spectre, and Dr. Fate from More Fun Comics. And around this point in time, they were all kind of culled from the JSA roster. Green Lantern and Flash, who'd been honorary members, came back. It's also a Hitler cover. And this is, All-Star Comics is a very collectible title. There are 65 on the Census. We're going to go to a different publisher. And this is another L.B. Cole cover. He was busy in 19 45. This is Catman Comics number 28 from Continental. These Catman comics are quite sought after. It does have the LB Cole cover and also interior art. And this classic skull cover. Dr. Macabre on the cover. These books are hard to get. The average grade, the mean grade on this book is a 4.05 with 61 copies on the Census. Another book with 61 copies on the Census, which we might consider a horror title, but really at the time was a humor title. You can tell by the way the cover is drawn. And this is Frankenstein, number 1 from Prize Publications. It's the origin of Frankenstein, a Dick Bryfer story, cover, and art. And Frankenstein at this point was considered more of a comedic character. He became a horror character a little bit later on. 61 copies on the Census. Next, another publisher. This is MLJ Magazines. Archie Comics number 16 is the top one on the Census. I don't think this one is any more or less significant than any other Archie Comics of 1945. It's just the one that has to be submitted the most. 57 copies on the Census. 10-cent Archies are very collectible. The Mirth of a Nation. And also with 57 copies on the Census, 84th on the list, is Crime Does Not Pay, the most submitted book by Lev Gleason. This is the cover here. It's Charles Biro did the cover. And we kind of have the shooting slash electrocution chair. That's, I think what that is the guy's robbing the bank and he shot somebody, and then the shadow is foretelling that he's going to get the chair. And we have the significance on the CGC slab says electrocution cover and hanging panels. That doesn't mean the panels are like not in line with everything else and they're hanging off or anything like that. It means that people are being hung on the panels inside. And again, we're getting true crime. We're getting closer to kind of that pre-code horror era. We don't have a lot of other genres. War and romance haven't come in yet, but pre-code horror, we're getting kind of the hints of it. Because these books weren't completely horror books, I don't think. I think that's a couple of years away. But we are getting these fantastical covers by the likes of L.B. Cole, and also these crime books are picking up steam. Let's go to the next one, and this is from Green Publications. This is Liberty Comics number 10. Interestingly, there are 55 copies on the Census. The cover is by Bernard Bailey, who is the creator of Our Man, and also I think he was the creator of Spectre. He drew him for a long time. Later did some other pre-code horror covers, and this is kind of a horrific cover with the woman in distress and the guy in the mask. But you also have the hero. It's essentially a classic superhero. Hangman and Boy Buddies appear. Susie and Wilbur begin. Okay, that's Liberty Comics number 10. Next, another publisher, Spark Publication, and this is a copy of Green Llama number 6. I'm not sure who the artist is. I don't believe it's Macro Boy at this point in time, but you do have the Green Llama on the cover, kind of ready to toss the swastika aside. And so this has 53 copies on the Census. Also with 53 copies on the Census is another Catman book, Catman number 29, also with an L.B. Cole cover. Dr. Macabre, also on the cover. As I said, 53 copies on the Census. And again, that's about a third of what it took to make the top 10 list. These L.B. Cole covers, Catman comics in general are fairly sought after, and the L.B. Cole covers in particular. Let's go to number 102. And that is Wilbur Comics from MLJ, which would later become Archie. And this is the first appearance of Katie Keene, who had her own book, had her own CW show. And so Wilbur was kind of like the B-list Archie. His books probably came out like in the alternating weeks when Archie wasn't coming out. 52 copies of this on the Census. With 51 copies on the Census, a little bit of a curio. This is the Top Charlton book. And there are 51 copies on the Census. The mean grade of a book on the Census, of the 51 books on the Census for this is 8.86. And I believe there was a promotion attached to this. But most of the copies are high grade. They're like, for instance, no 9.8s, but 11 9.6s of a book from 1945. There must have been a warehouse or office find, like file copies. Okay, what's next? We got to keep moving on. We got lots of books still to cover. The first appearance next in 4-color number 74, coming in 115th on the list. The first appearance of Little Lulu, or Marge's Little Lulu. She would have her own ongoing title for many years from the 40s, well through the 50s. And John Stanley story cover and art in 4-color number 74. 49 copies on the census. Also with 49 copies on the census is the highest ranked book from Fox Features Syndicate, and this is Green Mask number 1. Fox had some success, especially with the Blue Beetle. This is a new superhero. We are starting to see a few new superheroes from other publishers other than Marvel or DC that are coming up. Obviously, DC started Superboy stuff, but that is not a lot of new characters at this point in time. And we will see some new from some very small publishers, which I think is a collecting niche in and of itself. Let's go to number 123 on the list. 48 copies on the census for Spirit, no number. It's actually Spirit number 2. This is the highest ranking book from Quality Comics with a Lou Fine cover. I believe Will Eisner was still in the service at this point in time. So I don't know. Did these come out annually for a while? I think there were a total of 20 issues maybe for the Spirit through Quality, but most of the Spirit stories were being published in weekly Sunday newspaper inserts. Let's go to number 128 on the list, and this is from Novak Comics. This is the Great Comics number 1, the Knockout variant, which means the word knockout is printed over the indicia inside the book. What makes this significant? It is an L.B. Cole cover. Man, this guy was busy in 1945. And with all sorts of different publishers. This underwater scene, that is pretty cool. Terry Toons Comics, number 38. Also 47 copies on the census. This is the first appearance of Mighty Mouse, who was very popular throughout the 50s. Had his own cartoon series and has a very well-known theme song. If you've seen the, I don't know if it's included in the Saturday night film, but if you've ever seen the first episode of Saturday Night Live and Andy Kaufman's bit, you know what I mean. Up next, with also 47 copies on the census, is the top-ranking book from Gilberton. Gilberton essentially published Classic Comics, which became Classics Illustrated. This is the first edition, and this is Frankenstein. Some of these early first editions, there are numerous editions for Classic Comics. They have something called the HRN number. If you look at the back cover, they tell you, what other books are available, so you can see which issue number they were up to, but they kept reprinting, and these things went to 6, 7, 8 printings. It was crazy. Sometimes the covers differ, sometimes they don't, so you have to be a little careful with what you're looking for. But, of course, Frankenstein, a classic cover, and with the second Frankenstein book we've seen on the list. Let's keep chugging along. We're down to 45 copies on the census. This is for Warrior Comics number 1. This is the only issue, and it is from H.C. Blackerby Publications. Kind of interesting we have this many of this obscure book on the census, 45, with this, I think, rather crude cover art. It looks like an enlarged panel from a weekly newspaper strip that's been colored. Then there's no art credited to it, and that might be just fine. Our next comic is somewhat interesting, and it comes in at 138th on the list. This is Joe Palooka Fights His Way Back. And what it is you see Palooka there with his arm in a sling and his uniform on. This book was distributed free as a giveaway to wounded servicemen. Servicemen wounded during World War II. There are 44 copies on the census, and the mean grade of this book on the census, the mean grade is 9.01. There are tons of high-grade copies of this out there because I guess it was a giveaway. And maybe it was saved by, at least 40 people, 44 people, as a keepsake of their, a remembrance, or I guess maybe an honoring of their service in World War II. Now, something that was on the minds in terms of the title of many Americans, the cover does nothing to depict anywhere near that, is Atomic Bomb #1. And this is Nina Albright and August Froelich art. Airmail and Stampy appearance, and it's the only issue. There are 43 copies in the Census, and I think these obscure #1s are popular with a certain group of collectors, and I've been trying to figure out if this dude on the front cover has like just a tan bodysuit, or if he's just wearing boots, gloves, and his underpants with his cape and his domino mask. Let me know what you think, or maybe don't, in the comments below. Now, there's a 3-way tie, all from the same publisher, and this is from Nidor Publications. Each of these books has 41 copies on the Census. Black Terror #10, an Alex Schomburg cover, an Alex Schomburg Nazi cover with Black Terror on the cover. That is a really cool book, and a very sought-after book, but only 41 copies on the Census. And this is the kind of book that, if there were more available, they'd be graded in decent shape. Also with 41 copies on the Census, also from Nidor, and also with an Alex Schomburg cover. This time he's attacking the Japanese, who are depicted, so sensitively. Not. I'm being sarcastic. Is Exciting Comics #40. And that also has 41 copies on the Census, as does Exciting Comics 41. Also an Alex Schomburg cover. Also with the Black Terror. And this is the last war cover in the title. This is October 1945. He's attacking the Japanese fighter pilot. And I think by the time this book came out, certainly, if not when the cover was created, I think Germany had already surrendered, and we were just after a victory against Japan. Let's go to another publisher, and this is from Spotlight. This is Gem Comics #1. It's the only issue, which doesn't seem unique. It's a bondage cover, and it is, who's that, Joe Giunta? Or John Giunta is the cover artist. Not someone I'm familiar with. I think this gets propped up a little bit because it is a bondage cover, a woman in distress, and all that sort of stuff. Let's look at another publisher, also with 40 copies on the Census. This is from Holyoke. This is Power Comics #1. It's the last issue of Power Comics, and it's also by L.B. Cole. 40 copies on the Census. Let's drop down to we're at 166 on the list. This is Red Seal Comics #14. I think this is the highest ranking book from Harry A. Chesler. It's a Pete Gattuso cover, and it's the first issue. The Black Dwarf begins, a Nemo appearance, and a bondage hypodermic needle cover. So yeah, you got him shooting the hypodermic needle, and this young lady is in bondage, and she doesn't look happy about it. Red Seal Comics #1 from Harry A. Chesler. Coming in 171st on the list, KO Comics #1 from Girona Publications. This is a Mile High pedigree, and this is, interestingly, very interestingly, a Jack Kirby cover. The only Jack Kirby cover on the list. I think he was doing some work from the DC. This is, again, October 1945, so I think Jack Kirby was serving in the European theater, so he probably was home after the war ended in Europe and back to drawing comic books. I don't even know who this is. The character on the cover. But I don't know how long KO Comics lasted. We have a few more books to go. Just have to turn my page here for my notes. The next one. A huge, huge key. A very sought-after book. Punch Comics #12. A very desired cover by collectors. This skull cover, the action going on inside this gigantic skull with Gus Rika doing the cover. He did a lot of the Punch comics and some of the other books from Harry A. Chesler. There were at least one book of his on the list from 1944. I'm pretty sure there'll be one from 1946. And so just a classic cover, just 35 copies on the Census of this. And what's interesting about this is the average grade of this is 3.38. It is low. There is nothing higher than an 8.0 on the list. There are 3.5s, 2 1s, 4 1.5s.
if you have this in a 0.5 with the cover more or less intact, you're probably going to get it graded because it's such a desirable book. This is an interesting one, right? It is a key in terms of the way we define keys. Major character, first appearance on the cover. First cover appearance of a major character. And this is his 4th appearance overall. And it is More Fun Comics 104. 30 copies on the Census. A war-themed cover with Superman selling bonds to, what was that, Clover and Dover, the 7th War Loan. And this is the first cover appearance of Superboy. Only 30 copies on the Census. The next book is Airboy Comics, Volume 2, Number 11, by Hillman Periodicals, the top Hillman book on the list. Hillman was basically Airboy. This is the first issue of Airboy, even though it's not an issue number 1. Air Fighters Comics became Airboy again. This is December 1945. By the time this book came out, the war's over. Just as like on the side of quality, military comics changed title to modern comics, the war books, Airboy, Black Hawk, etc., are making that transition from war to peacetime material, and the superhero books are trying to figure their way out their way through that over the next year as well. Up next, the top book from Novelty Press at 228th, just 25 copies on the Census. This is Blue Bolt Volume 6, Number 4. It is noted as a skull cover, but it's more of a humorous / racially insensitive cover by Tom Gill. But Blue Bolt had more of a superhero bent early on and was kind of transitioning into some adventure stories and some humor stories. It's just quite a mixed anthology. And the last book we're going to talk about on the list is from Rural Home Publications. And this is Cannonball Comics number 2, the second and last issue of the series, and it is a devil cover. There are only 20 Universal Blue Labels on the Census, and the average grade of this across those 20 copies is 3.82. Right? There is a single 9.0 and then a 7.5. And again, there are lower grades in this. Most of the grades, the biggest chunk, are between 1.8 and 4.0. So that's going to do it for this list. There were a lot of comics to cover. Only one book nudged out Superman and Batman. Superman and Batman, 11 in the top 12 positions. And that's been fairly consistent throughout the 1940s. When will that change? Will we see different titles now that World War II is over, and there's a transition into peacetime, and we're seeing the seeds of the pre-code horror genre, where we have these horror covers, but not necessarily entire horror comics. But some of those tropes that we would see, the bondage and the true crime stuff that led to the Comics Code Authority, we're starting to see rise up here. Do you think any book in the next couple of years is going to supplant Superman and Batman in the top 10? Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, you can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.